The Mtatsminda Pantheon is located in the city of Tbilisi, on the slope of Mount Mtatsminda, near the church of Father David Mammadaviti. It is the burial place of outstanding writers, public figures, scientists and artists. In the 6th century there was a cave in this place where David of Goriji, one of the Assyrian fathers, settled. He lived in this cave practically all the time, and only came down to town on Thursdays. At one time there was a popularly revered path of St. David. It is likely that this is the present-day Tbilisi Street. There was a cemetery near the church of St. David where monks were buried. Then, shortly before the revolution, prominent figures were buried there. The cemetery was called a Pantheon, an ominous temple of all gods. After the revolution, as if in mockery of the shrine, new graves of revolutionaries appeared near the temple, people who defied God, people, one of whose goals was the destruction of Christianity. For a long time the cave was just a holy place, and in the 19th century a temple was built here. In 1829 Alexander Griboyedov was buried near the temple, and in 1857 the grave of his widow, Nina Griboyedova, appeared nearby. For a long time these were the only graves of famous people in this cemetery. Returning to Tehran, as Griboyedov stayed in Georgia, where he married Princess Nino but family happiness enjoyed only a few weeks. Griboyedov had a difficult mission ahead to persuade the Shah of Persia to fulfill the obligations assumed under the Treaty of Turkmenchay. Problems arose not only with the payment of contributions, but also with the return to the territory of Russia of prisoners previously captured by Persian troops in the Caucasus, among whom were Armenians and Georgians. On February 11, 1829, a crowd of fanatics moved towards the Russian mission. Griboyedov personally, together with Cossacks, defended the embassy with weapons in their hands. Nina learned the truth only a month later. No one could take the courage to tell her about the tragedy in Tehran. An accidentally overheard conversation provoked premature birth. The Griboyedov son did not live even a day. Nina Griboyedova never married again, and for almost 30 years did not take off her mourning clothes. She was called the Black Rose of Tiflis because she kept the memory of her dead husband for the rest of her life. Nina died in 1857 of cholera, and her last words were dedicated to her only lover. What your poor Nina has suffered since you left. We shall soon meet. We shall meet, and I'll tell you all about it. And we will be together forever. Together they rest in the Tbilisi Pantheon on Mtatsminda mountain. The tombstone is crowned by a monument in the form of a weeping widow, and the inscription on the tombstone is an eternal testimony to Nina Griboyedova's great love and loyalty. Your mind and deeds are immortal in Russian memory. But, for what did my love outlive you? Persia paid for the death of the Russian ambassador with rich gifts. Among them was the famous diamond Shah, which is now kept in the collection of the Diamond Fund. Relations between the two countries were saved. But could that make up for the loss of a loving woman? Ninusha, my wife, doesn't complain. She's happy with everything. Love my Ninachka. Do you want to know her? In the Hermitage, there is the Virgin Mary in the form of Murillo's shepherdess. Here she is. Wrote Griboyedov to his acquaintance Varvara Miklashevich. Now chronologically, the next buried after Griboyedovs is Prince Dmitry Kipiani. A little later, Prince David Arastavi, a descendant of the Arastavians of Sani, was buried, whose tombstone stylistically resembles the previous one. These two graves are now the earliest in the Pantheon. These are the graves of Alexander Sigarelli, Moshe Janishvili, and Vasya Shavel. In 1929 this place was officially declared a Pantheon. That year, the writer Alexander Sigarelli became the first at that cemetery with a new status. Behind the tomb of Vasya Shavila, in the far corner, one can see the original tombstone of the poet Akaki Tsereteli 18401915. There is no surname, just a name written on the black stone. In front of you is the burial place of Joseph Stalin's mother. The monument on the grave of Ekaterina Jaladze through Vasily Stalin was ordered by Yulian Rukavishnikov. The Pantheon was officially opened on the 100th anniversary of Griboyedov's tragic death in Iran. Since then, many prominent Georgians have been buried or reburied here. The cemetery is managed by the Tbilisi municipality and is one of the most famous city landmarks. A number of tombstones are made by famous sculptors v. Demut Malinovsky, Y. Nikoladze, E. Amashukeli, M. Berjanishvili, F. Khadorovich, Santan Campioni, I. Andriadze, B. Avalishvili, G. Shakvitsabaya. Now on the territory of the Pantheon, you can see the very cave of Father David. The Church of the Ivaran icon of the Mother of God was built over it. Nearby stands the Church of the Holy Father David, the largest church with an apse towards the city. A little to the south is the Church of the Transfiguration, which looks like a bell tower. All the buildings are brick. There are now 48 burials on the Pantheon grounds, to the right and left of the Temple of David. Burial in the Mtatsminda Pantheon is a form of showing respect and appreciation on the part of the state towards people of special merit. Yenikolopov was the director of the Pantheon for 30 years. Since 1905, the Pantheon has been accessible by funicular. One could also get there either by descending from the mountain or by going up from the lower station of the funicular. There was also a cable car on the mountain, on which on June 1, 1990 the worst accident of this kind of transport in the USSR and CIS occurred, with 20 dead and 15 injured. It is worth noting that the monuments of Stalin's time are strict, canonical, but in the era of Khrushchev begins rampant fantasy and aesthetic permissiveness. Here is the grave of Lado Gudiashvili. The artist, a contemporary of Pirosmani, died in 1980, and his tombstone is quite exotic. It is a copy of the capital of the Tbilisi Shan Cathedral, cracked across, and an element of the cathedral's ornament grows out of the crack. Unfettered by rigid dogma, before me is exalted, in the immoral, inconvenient, saints and angels, a wall, but I realize, hiding my shyness. I, unawakened savage, not part of the great church is the painting, but the church is a part of the painting. Lado Gudiashvili's hand, depicted on the wall, of people who sinned, rather than hovering above. He is not a blasphemer, not a mocker. He's a greater himself. He's either a god or a sinner. He's either an angel or a devil. And we are artists, poets, creators of underlying change. Like this church of Kashueta, painted so many walls. These are poems by poet Yevtushenko for Lado Gudiashvili. If you turn to the right from the temple, the first grave is that of historian Simon Janashia, after whom the National Museum of Georgia is named. The grave of Vakhtang Chabakiani, a man whose name is associated with the creation of the Georgian Ballet School. Monument to the ancestor of Georgian cinema Mikhail Shaureli and Veriko and Japridze, who performed in theater and cinema. A sculpture on the grave of artist Ushanji Chekhides. The grave of artist Sergo Zakariadze, creepy mask. The tombstone of Ilya Shavchavadze 1837-1907. The appearance of this tomb clearly changed the status of the cemetery, and the tombstone itself became an interesting phase in the development of Georgian ornamentalism. It is no longer an ordinary tombstone of an unknown author, but a work of art that clearly influenced the visual culture of its time in some way. This memorial was created in Paris, where Nikoladze was studying at the time, but it was installed here only in 1913. The large tombstone of Ikhtima Takashvili, the man who once created Georgian art history,